Hey everyone, so fantasy genre is my favorite genre. I read a lot of it in the 80s and 90s, took a little break to explore some other genres, but in the last 5 years or so I've really gotten back into loving this genre, and it is my #1 favorite right now. When I was looking at my bookshelf the other day, I realized I started counting, I've read over 30 fantasy series, and I thought it'd be fun to do kind of a ranking. So I'm going to do a tier list today to hopefully spur some discussion with you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the things that I've read, especially if I put them in a place that you disagree. I'd love to have just discussions with you about some of the favorite things that I've read. In the case of this video, my favorite genre, 30+ book series. Enjoy. All right, so most of you are probably familiar with a tier list. What I renamed the tiers here, the old S tier I renamed best to the best. The A tier is truly outstanding. The B tier, good to great. The C tier is middling. And the D tier I just labeled skip it. I kind of went with just a random order, although I did reorder some of these so that I could have authors together, so I could compare their works a little bit more favorably. Let's go ahead and jump in. The first one down here we see is The Wheel of Time. And The Wheel of Time, obviously the one that's known most as the bridge between classic fantasy and more modern fantasy, is actually the series that really got me back into just loving this genre so much once again when I read this in 2019. I think Wheel of Time is one of the best series out there and definitely an S tier for me. Now, most of these series I'm going to try to go pretty quick, except for the ones that might be a little controversial, so I'll have to kind of make sure that you know the reasoning why I might put something a lot lower than you would expect. But we don't want to be here forever, so I'll go kind of quick here. So it makes sense for me after the Wheel of Time to talk about Brandon Sanderson. So we have 3 series by Sanderson here, starting with Mistborn Era 1, which is the first series of his that I read. I really enjoyed Mistborn Era 1. I love the characters. To this day, it's still my favorite hard magic system that I have read. I love the ending. I thought the ending was beautiful. I know some people don't like the ending. I honestly don't know why, but I think Mistborn is a truly outstanding fantasy series and deserves to be in that tier. All right, Mistborn Era 2 is kind of the mashup between the Western and the fantasy, and I know a lot of people don't like it because of that, but I like Westerns, so I'm enjoying this one, and I like how it's building. I don't think it's ready for the outstanding tier quite yet. We will see. The last book comes out in November, and Sanderson is an architect, so maybe this will lead us up here. But I think it's more of a good to great fantasy series, certainly worth anybody's time, and it is one that I am enjoying and eagerly awaiting that last installment. All right, the Stormlight Archive is next. So this is only 40% done, so this is kind of an incomplete assessment of this series. Or you could say it's 80% of the first arc, which is 5 books. But with 4 books in, it's really, really incredible. I can't say that it's S tier yet. I think Oathbringer and Rhythm of War both had plotting problems. Oathbringer, it was minor, but Rhythm of War I thought had some major plotting issues in that one. So that's kind of the last installment, so that's, linger in my mind. But even with that, I think it's a truly outstanding book series that if book 5 does what it probably will, if he doesn't rush it and try to get it out too soon, it can probably vault into that best of the best. But as for now, I'm just going to put it in truly outstanding, and I'm going to put it below Mistborn because I do love that ending of Mistborn so much. All right, on to some classic fantasy. So, Rainbody Feist's Rift War Saga. I'm actually going to reread this later this year, probably November-ish, something like that. This is interesting. I've read it twice now, and I'm looking forward to a 3rd series. Of all the classic series I read in the 80s, which you'll see a lot of these that I'll talk about, this is the one upon reread I felt the most compelling to continue more into the universe. And I think it's a really, really great series. I know a lot of modern fantasy readers don't go back very far. Wheel of Time is about as far back as they go, but I think it's worth the time to go back to read the Rift War Saga. I think it's truly outstanding. Maybe not up to Way of Kings, Stormlight, but truly outstanding. And then I also read the duology Krondor's Sons, which is 2 books, Prince of the Blood and The King's Buccaneer. And I really enjoyed this one. Some aspects I liked more, but I wouldn't call it truly outstanding. I'd probably put it in the good to great category. But I will read more Feist. I'm planning on reading, again, Rift War later this year, and I'm going to read the Empire Trilogy that he wrote with Janny Wirtz later this year as well. All right, on to Robin Hobb. So this is my favorite fantasy author, so you know that these are going to tend to skew pretty high. Again, all of this is subjective, so when you see these placements and you disagree, I hope we can have a great conversation about them. So the first one, Assassin's Quest, is representing, of course, Farseer Trilogy, you know, representing Fitzchivalry Farseer, and it's the beginning of the first of the 5 series of the Realm of the Elderlings, and I love it. I love the Farseer Trilogy quite a bit. It's a truly outstanding book series, and I just read it last year, and I can't wait to reread it, which I guess is a testament to something as great as that. So the second series by Hobb is the Liveship Traders, which is the second series in Realm of the Elderlings, and it is a home run of a series, and it is one of the best fantasy series you'll read. It is so good that, listen, I don't necessarily like nautical fantasies, but I still think it's one of the best you can read anywhere. Fantastic. Most people consider that Hobb's best series. I do not, because I think Tawny Man is better. Tawny Man Trilogy, I just gave a review on this one. I'll put it in the cards up here or somewhere. But the emotional impact of the Tawny Man Trilogy, in many ways following Fitz's story after the Farseer Trilogy, was so stupendous. I liked it a little bit more than Liveship Traders. It was truly, truly one of the best series I've read. And then the fourth series in the Realm of the Elderlings, of course, is the 4-book Rain Wild Chronicles, which I see most reviewers say that this is their least favorite of the 4 series. And I would agree with that, but I love the world building in this one. I loved all the dragons in this one, and that's not a spoiler. All 4 books have dragons in the title. I really enjoyed it, but I think comparing Hobb to Hobb, this definitely goes in probably the good to great category. I'm going to put it there above Mistborn Era 2. All right, on to some classic fantasy, the Sword of Shannara. So this trilogy was the Sword of Shannara, the Elfstones of Shannara, and the Wish Song of Shannara. I love the Elfstones, and this is, again, some rereads, so this is pretty recent that I've read this. And Wish Song was real close, but then he kind of ruined it at the end of it, but I thought it was still pretty good. I'm going to put it in the good to great. I loved it as a child. I think Sword of Shannara was the first book I read that had over 700 pages, and I love that, even though if it was, you know, kind of a retelling of The Lord of the Rings. But I did enjoy Sword of Shannara. Heritage of Shannara I read about 5 years ago, I think, and I enjoyed enough of the Sword trilogy to read this trilogy, hoping that maybe this would be the series that I continue from my youth, but a lot of it fell flat for me, and part of it's personal. My least favorite fantasy trope, or trope in fiction in general, is the overly reluctant hero. And even though this 4-book series primarily had 4 different protagonists, there's one character in this book series that is an overly reluctant hero for 3.5 books. And it just drove me insane. So some of this is kind of, you know, personal, but, you know, I still think it's good. I wouldn't say it's middling, but that's kind of the end of my journey with the Shannara books, was after that series. All right, on to some Joe Abercrombie. Some of the finest modern fantasy you will read. First Law Trilogy is one of probably the gold standard for grimdark fantasy. It's the one you hear talked about the most because of the characters, and I would agree. I think it is clearly best of the best. One of the only book series where the characters in this series I quote in real life, which is just so weird. But I guess book readers would get it as well. But First Law is just tremendous. The characters, Glokta, Logan Nine Fingers, the dialogue, the world in general. I mean, I just love the First Law, and it is truly best of the best. Now I have the image down here of Best Served Cold because I wanted to include the 3 standalones in the First Law world, because I saw an interview where Abercrombie said that he kind of secretly wrote a 9-book epic. So with that in mind, I'm going to count the middle 3 as 3 books together. Best Served Cold, The Heroes, and Red Country. And the thing that I love most about these 3 books is the fact that it really shows Abercrombie's scope as an author. Because it shows in Best Served Cold that he wrote a grimdark revenge tale. And then The Heroes is a military fantasy. And then Red Country, there are not many fantasy elements at all. It's kind of just a Western. And what I love is when I see like a lot of booktubers talk about the 3 books and everyone has a favorite and everyone has a least favorite. And it just shows his scope as an author. I think it's a truly outstanding set of books that are definitely worth your time. Now, the most recent entry to fantasy book series I've read, I finished just last night, the Shattered Sea Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. And this is the one that's kind of forgotten a bit, and it shouldn't be. I think it's very, very good. It's a departure for Joe, although it eventually becomes kind of a character study. It's a lot more plot-focused than his other tales. It's very fast-paced. I think it was very erroneously labeled as young adult. It's not young adult at all. It's not quite grimdark, but it's still pretty dark at times. And I really enjoyed it. I had some flaws in the series, but overall, I think it goes somewhere in this B tier, good to great. Maybe here. Yeah, that feels about right. All right, a series that I don't know anybody else that's read this one. This one popped up on my Kindle from my library. It's a Queen of the Tearling Trilogy. Erica Johansson's the author. And I think it's a YA series. I'm not really sure. I don't know what those lines are, but it has a teenage female protagonist, so they normally label that as YA. What I liked about this series is it's kind of a epic one story split into 3 parts. And it's good. It's very good. I love the protagonist, but what I love most about it, and the reason I wanted to really include it here, is this has one of the most bold endings for a book series that I've read. And I guarantee her publisher tried to talk her out of it. And I'm glad she stood her ground, because I really liked the finality of the ending of this one. And there are some book series down here I'll talk about soon that didn't have good endings. So this one's definitely good to great. I think maybe let's squeeze it between the Shannara books. All right, what's next? Lord of the Rings. I mean, do we have to talk about it? The Great Tales of Middle-earth by Tolkien. So these, they're great. What else can I say? All of the post-Lord of the Rings stuff that Christopher Tolkien put out is kind of in that B tier in my mind, including the Silmarillion and Unfinished Tales, even though those are probably the 2 best. These great tales are very good. I mean, I felt like I was reading things of importance, but I wouldn't say they're in the outstanding category. Had Tolkien had time to finish them himself? Maybe, but I would say they're just kind of in the good to great, but more on the great side of things. So the great tales are great. Up next, the Chronicles of Pride. This was my very first book series that I ever read, 6th grade, and I reread it this January, and I found it was still just pretty delightful. Now, it is a middle grade series, so for this to be compared to a lot of these adult series is kind of tough, but I will say that, unlike the very next book series I'm going to talk about, I love the brave ending that he had. This was a much bolder ending than I think, not that I read a lot of middle grade or YA, but I think a bolder ending than a lot of things along those lines. So this goes in the good to great category, maybe below Shannara. All right, let's talk about Harry Potter. So we're talking about the books. We're not talking about the author. We're not talking about any of the bad movies after. Actually, any of the movies. We're not talking about Cursed Child or anything like that. This is just on the merits of the 7 books. So a case can be made for S tier. I mean, this is a book series so popular and so beloved by so many people that households were buying multiple copies so that kids and parents could experience them at the same time. I mean, that alone should make it S tier. And this is probably a book phenomenon we will never see in our lifetime again. However, you could tell that there was quite a bit of world building as she went along. A lot of the things that she did caused plot holes in earlier books. I also have some major flaws with the last book. Did not think the series ended well. But then you go back here, and the one thing I really liked about the series is I loved how each book got more complex as the kids in the story got older. And I think that was pretty cool. People talk a lot about how she, aged up her books as her readers got older, but I think it was more as the characters got older, and I really enjoy that. I think Harry Potter is outstanding, and I think it deserves a spot in that tier. I have major problems with the ending. I think... Anyway, let's move on. But I think it's truly outstanding. All right. I read last year the complete Chronicles of Conan the Barbarian. Conan of Cimmeria by Robert E. Howard. Most of these are short stories, so it's hard to compare them to these longer series and all these novels and long series. But I really enjoyed these. If you like just old school sword and sorcery, soft magic, Conan is unapologetically barbaric, just as his title, and I really enjoyed these. I think he deserves a spot. Good to great. I think they were fantastic. All right, up next, the Dark Tower series by Stephen King. The Dark Tower series has some of the most boldest and bravest storytelling you will find anywhere. And I think it's a clear-cut best of the best in the fantasy genre. Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. Okay, this is the first time I'm going to make some of you mad. I read 3-book series. Okay, I was 12 at the time, so maybe 12-year-old Josh is an idiot. I plan on rereading this next year, so if I do and I totally change my mind, I'll pin a comment or something on this video. But as a 12-year-old, I read 3-book series. In this genre, I read Chronicles of Pride, I read Lord of the Rings, and I read Chronicles of Narnia, and I felt Narnia was a distant third. Even as a 12-year-old, I found the Christian allegory just heavy-handed, and I just didn't connect with it. So I hate to make it the first entry in the middling category, but I'm going to. So tell me why I'm wrong, because I'm sure I am. It's been a long time since I read it. I am rereading them next year, though, so... I reserve the right to change my mind. All right, Dragonlance Chronicles. Okay, so these I read in high school, and as I was playing D&D at the time, it feels like a D&D campaign. And I reread these as well last 10 years or so. And the biggest flaw, I think, is just the characters feel like characters from a D&D campaign that don't have a lot of depth. And there's so many of them. So it's almost like you have a table full of these characters. But it was still delightful. I do like high fantasy. I miss fantasy that just has elves and dwarves and halflings and all of that. So I have a soft spot in my heart for Dragonlance. I'm going to put it just above Sword of Shannara. And I read a second series in Dragonlance, and that is the Dragonlance Legends, which is the sequel series. And I reread this very recently, like 2 or 3 years ago. And I was very pleasantly surprised. This is a big improvement on the Chronicles series because it focuses on 4 characters, 3 of them from the Chronicles, so you're able to give them a lot more depth and flesh them out. Plus there's like time travel, and it's kind of some pretty bold storytelling at times. So Time of the Twins, I think, is still in the good to great tier, but definitely better than Chronicles. Maybe, I think we'll put it above Shattered. No, I think we'll put it, yeah, let's put it there. All right, Witcher. This is another one. Like, I don't know where this goes. So, the Witcher short stories, truly outstanding. Really great kind of Monster of the Week little vignettes, but they had great world building. It introduced us into characters very, very well. They still had kind of a through narrative. Really enjoyed them. The novels... Man, the novels are lousy. I hate to be blunt, but fuzzy world building, characterization extremely inconsistent. When he takes the time to flesh out a character, he's great, but he doesn't do that with so many secondary characters. So, I mean, I think I'm going to have to put Witcher in middling. I can't recommend the novels. If we were just on the short stories, it would be right up there somewhere in this truly outstanding category, because I think the short stories are truly outstanding. But those novels, granted, I've only read 3 of the 6. They're not very good. Let's move on. All right. The Earthsea Cycle, Ursula K. Le Guin. So, highly influential classic fantasy series. Influenced Harry Potter. It's just one of those really, really great series. I had trouble getting into it. Part of it, her prose is very, very dense. Additionally, I found the 6 books kind of uneven. It wasn't really a through narrative, so I can't put her in the best of the best. My question is it great or is it truly outstanding? And I think it's more great than outstanding, to be honest. I mean, certainly at the top of the great category. But I just felt maybe because the last book, I felt a little disappointed in the last book, so I don't think I can put it up into that truly outstanding category. But I did enjoy Earthsea quite a bit. And I'll revisit it again years from now just to see if maybe I get more from it the second time around. All right, this is the Chronicles of Amber by Roger Zellisny. I have a great admiration for this series. It's low fantasy. It's kind of a parallel world where the protagonist wakes up in our world. And it's epic fantasy in disguise. 5 very short novels, less than 200 pages to make one continuous narrative. Also, if you read other Zellisny, like Lord of Light or something like that, he's very experimental in his approach. And I like that. I think a lot of people give him a bad rap because they don't read enough of him to see that he would often change his prose style for the types of books he was writing. So they might see the simplistic prose in this book and think that it's not very good. But I have a lot of admiration for Chronicles of Amber. I think it's really great. I'm going to put it let's put it in the middle of the good to great category. All right, on to my favorite author when I was reading fantasy in the 80s and 90s, and that was David Eddings. Now, I have since reread all of these, so these are very modern reviews of these. The first series he wrote is called The Belgariad. It's a 5-book series starting with the book Pawn of Prophecy, and I love The Belgariad. Modern fantasy readers struggle with it because it's formulaic, it's derivative, it has every trope in the book. But it also has clever characters that you care for, characters that you love. And if you don't mind the old school tropes, you'll probably love The Belgariad. And I do. I think it's truly outstanding. I'm going to put it just ahead of Rift War Saga. Now, The Malorian, which is the second 5-book series set in the world of The Belgariad, Eddings takes the same characters, adds a couple new ones, but takes the same tropes and basically tries to tell you the same series again. And unfortunately, it doesn't have the same impact. And it's a big drop-off from the series I love, The Belgariad, to The Malorian, which I think is quite middling. I'm going to put it there. Then the Illenium. Oh, so he changed worlds? And this is a trilogy, but he used the same tropes, the same Tolkien derivations, all of the same formulas. And the Illenium is a series of Eddings that I can seriously say that you can skip. Because the characters, I didn't care for any of them. And that was, for me, the heart of the Belgariad was Garion and Silk and Polgara and Belgarath. I mean, just such a great cast of characters. And the Illenium, Sparhawk, and I can't even name another one. Tells you a lot. All right, 2 to go. Poppy War, R.F. Kuang. I read this just a couple months ago. Poppy War, for some people, I can understand why some people would put it S tier, and I can see why some people put it middling. I wouldn't go that far down here. I think it's borderline truly outstanding and good to great. and that's personal for me. The thing I didn't like is a lot of it is a military fantasy, which is not my favorite subgenre. So I think it's on the great end of things. I'm going to put it maybe just above Conan here. And finally, A Song of Ice and Fire. So this is 100% the 5 books. This has nothing to do with the TV show. This has nothing to do with the fact of how long we've been waiting for the next book, or that he's written other books or Fire and Blood or any of that. This is the 5 books of A Song of Ice and Fire. First 3 books, truly up here. Books 4 and 5, I mean, maybe down to here. It's a tough one, but I think I'm going to put it, truly outstanding at the top. But if we get Winds of Winter, which I think we'll get that one. A Dream of Spring, I think, is just a dream, to be honest. But I think this could easily vault up into the S tier. All right, well, let's look at my list. Best of the best, Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, Tawny Man, Liveship, First Law, Dark Tower. Yep, that's about it. Truly Outstanding, Song of Ice and Fire, Mistborn, Farseer, Stormlight, Standalones, Belgariad, Magician, Harry Potter. Yep, I like that order. Good to Great, Earthsea Cycle, Rainwild, Poppy War, Conan, Great Tales, Time of the Twins. See, Krondor. Hey, I'm happy with this list. Our middling, yep. Skip it, yep. Okay, I'm going to hit save. So there it is, the 33 book series. Let me know what I got right. Let me know what I got wrong. I want to talk with all of you in the comments section below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you want to interact with me more, Twitter and Goodreads, I'd love to interact with you there. I have that information below. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.